Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Breaking the Cycle Two-Step Forward podcast, number 15. I'm Chris Tuck and...
Hello, I'm Beverley Ann.
Welcome.
And Chris, would you like to go through and talk about what we're discussing today?
Yes, so today's topic of conversation is the media and the language that they use to spark a conversation or not.
Yes, I don't know if I'd say spark a conversation, but more like clickbait, trying to get us to click on sensationalizing. So it'd be good to look at the language. And before we start, we just want to warn people, we will be going into what the media are saying, and we're looking at this. And sometimes it can be a little bit triggering to hear some of the things we'll be saying, but we feel that it's important to do this to raise awareness and to educate people.
Absolutely. So would you like to start or me?
You can start today, Chris.
Okay, lovely. So I believe over the last few years in particular that what we are seeing in mainstream media is being controlled. There are certain people behind the mainstream media that are using their platforms to sell a particular narrative. And I'm not going to go into that, but what I want to touch upon is the power and the control and the misuse of that to give us information that they deem we should be seeing and believing, but what we may not be questioning. And as a survivor of childhood abuse in all its forms, including yourself, we do not trust unless we've learnt to trust, but we ultimately, inherently, do not trust straight away, and we question everything. So if someone is out there telling me that I need to do something, telling me I need to believe something, or telling me I should be, no, that doesn't sit well with me. I question everything and I make my own choices. And that is my growth from being a survivor of all forms of abuse, and also making decisions that are right for me as an autonomous person and what I believe is correct for me. And I believe that everybody should be given the same freedom and the same autonomy over themselves, whatever that looks like for them.
Absolutely.
What about yourself?
Chris, you've said it so well and so succinctly. And it's important for people to understand that, that word trust, learning, because our trust was violated for different reasons. Even learning to trust our own responses, we deconstruct it before we question everything before we actually start to trust ourselves, let alone anyone else. So I think that that's really important. And I know that there'll be some of our listeners going, oh, I do that. And we do that to make sure that we're safe. And that's where some of these messages, and let's have a look at some of these headlines and some of the language that's used. Because for me, it's quite shocking. Well, it's very shocking at times. When we think about young children and when we see, child pornography.
Yeah.
Well, I understood that pornography is for consenting adults over the age of 18. And I'm not saying that pornography is wrong or right, and we're not here to discuss that. But there's all different types of pornography. But for me, you put the word child in it, no, it's abuse, because that child has not given their consent to be taking part. They can't. They can't. So that word child pornography does not exist, and yet we see it so many times. All the
time. Yeah. It really riles me when I see that, because we know that those two words together, that phrase means rape, buggery, sexual assault, violation of a child, all of which are crimes.
Yeah. And that includes photography. So,
yes.
you know, over the years, there's been several different cases where people have been convicted of having images of children.
Yeah.
And people think to themselves, oh, it's only a few photographs. Trust me, for that conviction to go through to court, it's not a few photographs.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not just innocent pictures, as we should, you know, and we're not going to go into that because we're very aware, you know, there's a time and a place, not that we try and hide from things, but we're already talking about something quite triggering. So, you know,
but
we
think about the media, though, don't we, Beverley, that the media should be responsible for the language that they're using.
Absolutely.
And that's just one example.
One example. Another example is child prostitution.
Yes.
Now, prostitution, sex workers, again, I see it as consensual adults over the age of 18, rightly or wrongly. You know, we're not going into that, but they are providing a service, all sex workers, like, for instance, and it's consensual. So if it's not consensual and there's rape involved, that is rape, regardless of the role. Okay, put the child into it. How is that prostitution? That is abuse.
Yeah.
Child brides, child marriages. That is not marriage. That's not consenting.
No,
it is abuse.
Yeah, completely agree. And there are a lot of people, especially when child marriage in commas is spoken about. Even in that culture, there are many people that are up in arms about child marriage being abuse, like we're saying, because they don't agree with it and we don't agree with it. And that child, what right has that child been given? None. They've just been told that they've got to do this, this and this in the instance of child marriage. But in the instance of where they're being abused, raped and all the rest of it, there is they're not even being told. They are just, a crime is being committed against them. So, you know, in the case of the child marriage, you've got all of the family around that child celebrating that marriage, and it's wrong.
It's not a marriage. It's not a marriage because it's not two consenting adults, as we always say. It is a young person being married to an older person who
against their will,
who has no choice. Who has no choice. That is abuse, but it's in the limelight. It's actually carrying on in front of our very eyes.
Exactly. And then obviously you've got abuse within the family home, for example, that is behind closed doors, and that people say like, oh yeah, we're not seeing it, so we don't need to worry about it. Both are as equally as horrific for that child and young person.
Absolutely.
You know, so that's just two things about media and language. What more have you come across?
The victims and perpetrators, the alleged perpetrator, who's an upstanding person. That's the first thing that is put forward.
Pillar of the community.
Yeah.
Never done anything wrong in his life or her life.
No, it's a witch hunt. It's a witch hunt. Whereas,
what do you mean by that, witch hunt?
Well, that's what they put forward. This person is lying. They want
the person is claiming
the victim,
that's a witch hunt,
or the alleged victim, as they say. The alleged victim is doing it for money. Is doing it for 15 minutes of fame.
Yeah,
that one really gets me for both of those. But then they'll go through their background, and it's like they're trying to have to prove that they are this pillar of community, society. You know, there is no other crime. If someone comes and burgles your house, no one is looking at you as a, as a victim and saying like, well, you shouldn't have left the window open.
Or you shouldn't have worn that short skirt, or you shouldn't have done this, or you shouldn't have done that. They don't deconstruct the victim, do they? And they don't deconstruct the perpetrator. They just say, right, there's the crime of burglary. It's happened. It goes to court if you're caught, and there's the sentence. Whereas when it comes to abuse, sexual violence, sexual assault, it's like, here's the victim, and this is everything wrong with the victim, and here's the perpetrator, and oh my God, look what he does for the community. Look how much money he donates, or she. Look at what they've done, and they've never committed a crime in their life before.
No.
Got to stop.
And this is another misnomer when they're talking about paedophilia again. And this, as we were talking about before, is something that goes back years and years ago. So there's a documentary that the NSPCC used to show, 25 years ago and longer.
Yeah.
Because people's perception of a paedophile and what is given to us in the media is that it is, a paedophile generally, let's go to generally, because we always go. A paedophile generally is a heterosexual man who is a family man, has children, as in a position of power within what they are, but they're friends. They're in a circle. They don't just act alone. They have other people that they're in the cycle of, not that one person that lives maybe on his own with his parents, as is depicted often by the media. And when they do arrest one person, look at Epstein. Is he the only person? No, he's not. It's seen that there's two others. Well, what about all the other people around them? Are they all innocent? Are they all innocent? Absolutely not. Because
no, the question does need to be asked, doesn't it? I think we do have to be careful, though, that you're not guilty by association.
Absolutely, but
because
it's okay
but you
it's
have
okay to look.
And
absolutely,
look, definitely,
ask the questions, and stop when the questions are asked. Stop victim blaming. Because we do that's done in the media all the time. Yeah.
I understand. The reason why I've said we can't say everyone guilty by association, because my dad's a paedophile, convicted, and obviously I don't abuse. So I just wanted to make that very, very clear, that we're not saying, that's not what you're saying.
No. And that's what I love about our conversations, because we are opening this, but we do need to look at some harsh facts.
Yes.
That awful saying, children should be seen and not heard. I mean, I don't know about you, but I grew up with that. You grew up with that. And you've got something really interesting to say, because that was really reflected on a program that you watched.
So I shared it on my social media, but it's a documentary that was made in America like years and years ago, but I've only just come across it. And it was so hard to watch, Beverley. I've explained this to you already. Hearing from the sex offender's mouth as to how they were able to do their crimes against children. And all of these convicted sex offenders had been abused themselves, and some of them were in touch with their remorse and their guilt at offending, and were actually really horrified that they'd done it. But most of them were like, well, we're going to share with you what parents should be saying to their children. So one of them noticed that the relationship between the parent and the child, how was that? This parent, he offended hundreds, and they were all within his family and friend circle, hundreds of children, over 1,000 acts against these children, right? Because he could get away with it because he was so trusted by everybody. But he noticed the adults that spent time with their children or didn't. So all of those mums and dads and caregivers that were sort of like dismissive of the children. Oh yeah, I'm a bit busy at the moment. Go to your bedroom. Oh yeah, I'm a bit busy at the moment. I'm doing this, I'm doing that. Go and play. So even though we are all busy, and we've all said that to our children, but if you're completely and always dismissive of the children, and there's this person lurking in your circle that notices that, they can then step in and go, oh, I see you're busy. Do you want me to take your child out? Or go straight to the child and go, oh, I see, mum, dad, caregivers busy. Do you want me to play a game with you? And that is where the opportunity for grooming and getting access to the children happens. So that was one particular person that said that. And another one said he had been abused as a child. Not to use that as a, you know, condoning
reason.
that.
No,
yeah,
because we've been abused, but we don't
exactly
abuse.
But he was abused as a child, and he had spoken up, and basically he was shut down. No one believed him. So then that gave him the opportunity to understand that his victims would not be believed either, because once a child has spoken up and that adult or the appropriate action's not been given, the appropriate response has not been given, that child learns not to speak up again. And so it silences them. So this particular sexual offender, sex offender, paedophile, whatever you want to call them, he noticed that, and that's how he kept his victims silenced and complicit in the abuse that he was perpetrating, until one day this particular child, victim of his, turned around and did speak up, but kept speaking up. So another sex offender turned around and said, teach your children not to speak up once if they don't get the right response, but keep saying it to different people. Keep saying it until someone hears you and someone steps in. He said, because that is what sexual offenders do not want. They want the silence. So if they know children are going to keep speaking up, that's going to jeopardize their operation, their way of operating.
Absolutely.
So very triggering, but very interesting to hear.
Yeah, and anyone listening, obviously take some deep breaths while you're listening. Even put some hand cream on, which is really good while you're listening.
Just
because
touching.
It's important. I use hand cream all the time. The other thing I want to talk about, continuing on from our subject last week as well, about mental health. Now, we're talking a lot more about mental health, which is really great, but the media have kept everybody silent for years. You know, the messages we know that, you know, one of the things that really gets me at the moment with young people, you see about snowflakes of today. How dare they? Because what that does in saying the word snowflakes, it's the message that comes behind it. And actually, we want people to be able to speak out. It takes courage to be vulnerable. It's not a sign of weakness. It is actually courage. And actually, that word snowflake should be taken out. Even when they say about woke being so dismissive, what's wrong with being inclusive? But that term woke sometimes also when they're talking about people with mental health.
What does that word woke even mean?
Well, it's to do about being awake. So when you're awake and you're all inclusive with people, so you're accepting of people because of gender, whatever. So it's saying is we're all inclusive. And the term awake is being awake to the messages, for instance, what we're talking about today, being awake and aware of what is going on all around and being able to ask the question. I don't understand this. Why is that happening? It's given permission for that.
And again, sorry, Bev, to jump in, but the fact that we can't ask questions in the media at the moment, we're all being fed a certain narrative, we're all being shut down and silenced. As a survivor, that don't sit well with me. Does it sit well with you?
Not at all. Not at all. So that word fake news.
Yes.
Where did that come from? Because I understand, if you go back to our world wars, even here in England, let's not go anywhere else. In England, there was propaganda, but it was never called fake. I would call it fake news. And it's still being shared today. Because if you look at how everything was interpreted, there's another side. Why can't we ask this other side? Why is that not being reported? Because there are two sides,
And again, going back to silencing the child so that these acts of crimes can be perpetrated against them, it's the silence and the not questioning and the not standing up and speaking out that keeps all of this going. It feeds it. So no, No.
And even in school,
Bystander, not a bystander.
Yeah, and it's okay to ask a teacher, why are we learning this? We're not questioning the teacher.
No.
But you want to understand, you know, sometimes I didn't understand things, but when you question a teacher, you know, they're human beings, sometimes they take it wrong, you know, but it's, you know, it's okay to ask those questions. And if we don't teach children to be able to ask questions in our school system, how do we expect them to learn it?
Yeah. But, you know, to be able to ask those questions of any adult, really, that they are in connection with. And if we don't know the answer, we don't know the answer. But let's not just shut them down and silence them, because if we do, we've spoken about this already, if we do that, they will go somewhere else. And that might not be a safe adult that they're turning to. We might think they're a safe adult, but they're not.
No.
Potentially. Potentially.
Yeah. So yes, I mean, all of this is not nice. Going back to mental health, you know, we see the words madman. You know, we see a frenzied attack from a madman. We see like a madman was pinned down by 4 or 5 policemen, suggesting that this mad person, you know, has got so much strength that they were going to wreak havoc. Whereas actually, that's not true. Often,
if you read the article,
and also just because someone's got a mental illness, regardless of what it is, you know, doesn't make them a bad person. And often, you know, we're not asking the story, what happened before, but it's the way it's portrayed, and in films, and I really appreciate now, and I don't watch them now, haven't watched them for years, but one thing I will say about the soaps, I do like how they do like to, not all of them, but most of them, and you and I know, especially, you know, and I'm going to say it, Coronation Street. Do you remember when they were sharing the story years ago about a girl being groomed and sexually abused?
Yes.
And is it Phil, the actor that played the
no, not Phil. That's not Phil. No,
not Phil.
It's Chris.
Chris, sorry, the actor that played the paedophile, he actually came to survivor groups and asked questions and wanted to hear. He was really interested in it, so that the message was portrayed in a positive way, as in, this is what happens in reality, but also if you need support, this is support that you can have after the film. So,
and our good friend Phil, he obviously worked with Chris to make that storyline, and Phil's worked in behind the scenes of other soaps to get the storylines as accurate as possible. So I think that's fantastic, where these media platforms, film producers have used the experiences of victims and survivors to portray it correctly.
Yes, and I think now the journalists need to look at that a bit more. There's a lot of guidelines out there anyway. The Samaritans issue lots of guidelines to the media, and they do have some accountability, but it's really not effective overall, you know. And I do feel that this needs to be done more and more.
There's one more phrase that I really hate, and I endeavour to challenge people on it every single time I hear it, is the term historical abuse.
Non-recent abuse. Yeah.
Only because historical, perception of historical is that it's done and dusted. You should be over it. You should, it doesn't matter anymore. You don't count. It was ages ago, you know, just move on with your life. And we all know that if you've gone through abuse, you've suffered trauma, and the trauma can be in the here and the now, and it can be actually worse than the acts of abuse that you've gone through for some people. So the fact that we can change that and say non-recent or current, I think is completely the best thing to be doing, so we don't dismiss anybody's actual reality.
Yes, absolutely. And communication is important. And I did at one time use the word historical, because that was the only communication, that the term that I knew about, but you're quite right, non-recent sits more prevalently, because it's also got that word recent, because it still has an impact whether we like it or not. We learn how to change things and how to live our life when we go through therapy, etc., but it's still there, it's still part of your everyday life.
And again, I've got no problem with people using terminology and language that we've outgrown, but don't keep using it if you know different and you know better. And we've told the media, there's so many victim survivors out there, and stakeholders and organisations, they've told the media, don't keep doing this, and yet they're not listening.
No, and that's where that comes down to the journalists themselves being educated, and quite happy to have that discussion as well. If there's any journalists listening today and you want to find out more information, we want you to know, it's, you know, we're not berating you. As I said, I used to use that terminology, but it's good to be aware because it makes a difference. But there is one other that is in the media, and again, it's about, we started talking about child marriage and that, and how abuse is being wrapped up in a different way, and the minor attracted person.
Ugh, the maps.
Now, for anyone not hearing, and please look after yourself here, but there's paedophiles actually trying to get classified as minor attracted people. So they get accepted in society. And I just think that is an absolute no. I don't care how you wash it up. I don't care how you say it. But some of these people are in quite high power as well.
Yeah. They tried that kind of wrapping it up differently so it's more acceptable to society years and years ago as PI, the paedophile information exchange and all of that. If you don't know about that, I'm not going to go into it, but you can Google it all.
And look it up.
But we are not dressing or not going to allow child abuse in all its forms, especially sexual, rape, buggery, sexual violence. We're not dressing that up any other way. It is what it is. It's crimes committed against children who do not have a say, they do not consent, and they are under the age of all.
What I fail to understand, though, is when we come to physical abuse, that's different. Physical, you know, we now know we don't allow, you know, any physical reprimand in schools now. The slipper, the cane, the ruler. I had the ruler on my hand. That is a no-no. You know, smacking our children, no. Do you see what I mean? So we've done it with physical abuse. And I fail to understand why it's so challenging when it comes to sexual abuse.
And also mental abuse. So obviously we've got coercive control laws now where we recognise that as being between adults, but it could be happening between the adult and the child.
Oh, so much. You know,
mental abuse, we're not even touching upon that yet.
No. So
but it is shifting, isn't it?
And this is where I was going to sort of, let's go to the positive sides now for the last 3 minutes, so that we're leaving people, because we don't want it to be all, you know, there are two sides to everything. There are two sides to everything. I think it's great, you know, we've got this platform here, we've got other platforms. You know, some people, some of the films, some of the programs that you see are starting to address this and open this up, as uncomfortable as it is, and it needs to be. It needs
to be opened up.
Yeah.
So there are so many more as well. I don't know if you've noticed on social media platforms, not mainstream media, more victim and survivors stepping up and speaking about all of this, just like me and you. And it's fantastic to see. There's more victim and survivors stepping up and running their own peer-to-peer support groups. Fantastic, amazing. So the more we can do this on a local basis within our own families, our own communities, it's just going to snowball, and then people can start changing the conversation, and we can all better protect children as a result.
And that's where, and we haven't discussed this, so I'm doing this, you know, we've not had a chance, but one of the things this week that came out was about the Truth Project.
Okay.
And that's coming to an end now, and I know you've been very much involved in that. And I saw a post on social media about some of the actions that they've started. Now, one of the actions that they've done is that there are benches all over the UK. That includes Wales as well, England, Wales, and Scotland, I take it.
No, not Scotland, no, because it's not
England
part of
and
the
Wales.
inquiry. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And they've got benches. My first thought initially was, personally, benches, is that all you're doing? What about this? But then I thought about it, and I thought, you know what? I'm actually pleased that's a start, because what we're doing is a physical sign for the voices. And for somebody sitting there, it may mean that there's a child is reading what's written on the plaque and will ask questions, even to themselves. Or the adults, what does this mean? What is this about? And then I thought, do you know what? This is a good start. I'm interested to see what else is going to come from it.
Absolutely. And this is what I was saying when I went on social media yesterday, and I saw some negative comments by some vocal voices that are always been against the inquiry, or the inquiry's not delivered on what they wanted. So they've been against. But what I want to say about the bench legacy, and again, we haven't discussed this, so I'm glad you brought it up, and I'm glad you came to the conclusion that you did, because victim and survivors that were in the forum, so they gave their voice to the inquiry over the last 6 years, and victim survivors that have gone through the Truth Project, they were asked, what legacy would you like to see? Forget about the final report and the recommendations, because that's happening anyway. And that will be based on what the panel have heard, what they've seen, and they will make those recommendations. And fingers crossed, it cuts across what everybody wants. But I've got to leave that there. But the benches, this legacy, we were asking, the inquiry asked the victim survivors, what would you like to see? And this was one of the ideas, this was one of the concepts, and they wanted tangible things to continue the conversation of child sexual abuse. And that is what it's going to allow to happen. Because imagine, Beverley, we could go, right, we're going to go to that town next month, and we're going to sit on that bench, and we're going to do some social media on that bench around that, and you can do that nationwide. So it's going to get that conversation happening all the time once inquiry's gone.
Well, that's going to be my next thing, because I know you've been involved in the inquiry, and for anyone listening, yes, I was one of the people that took part, and then there was a police interview following that. I wasn't part of the forum, but what I am interested in is, how do we find out where those benches are?
So there is going to be their own website. So at the moment, there's an Instagram account that you can go and check out.
And what's that called?
I'll have to share it, because I don't know the top of my head.
Okay, no worries.
But there's a Twitter account, and that is at Inquiry CSA. So there's all of the information on there. And also you can go to the website, ixa.org.uk, and it's all on there. So and there's going to be a map of where all of the benches are nationwide, and then they're also going to, if they click on a bench, they can see all of the information about where that bench is and the quote. And also, if you go to the bench, you can scan to go into the website. And also the language on the quotes are not just in English, they're in other languages.
Fantastic.
So to reach out to as many people as possible, and to keep this conversation happening, because what we don't want is the final report and its recommendations being put on a shelf, swept under the carpet, silent. We want this final report over here, which is going to be the true legacy of the inquiry. But these benches, everybody can get involved.
And I'd like to think we'd have a regular inquiry, in all fairness.
Yeah, you know, again,
I know what
Yeah.
has happened since the last one, what needs to still be changed.
There needs to be updates, yeah.
But we sorry,
I
Chris, go on.
know,
Your
but I
last
want to
thought.
go back to the bench, yeah.
Yeah.
I often sit on benches and read the person that's died and what that bench meant to them, what that local community meant to them, and I find comfort from that.
Absolutely. And that's one of the legacies I'd like to leave one day when I move into the next world, shall we just say. Yes, absolutely. So that's where it touched my heart as well. So we'll put the information in the box anyway, in the comments, people can see that. And we are running over now. So your last thoughts for today, Chris, your last thoughts for today.
We need the media to be more responsible about the language that they use and the pictures that they're painting by the language that they're using. Yeah. We need the truth to be out there in a transparent and honest way.
Yeah. And for me, absolutely back that up. But also, instead of highlighting the minority at times, like they're very quick to highlight this person's innocent, you know, let's have some facts and figures of what actually happens. So we're not just focusing on this high profile celebrity that's not been found guilty. Doesn't mean to say they're innocent. They haven't been found guilty in a public court. So I'm going to choose my words carefully there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
And let's learn from Jimmy Savile, because until we start learning from it, it's no good knowing about it. Until we start learning from it, then things will change.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, there are so many stories, or not stories, lived experiences being shared in the papers at the moment. There's even one at the moment about ritual abuse. There's so many about grooming gangs. There's so many about white gangs, women and men perpetrating abuse. So it's all over the news. You can't get away from it. No. And you shouldn't be able to get away from seeing it. But just know that what we see in the media is just the tip of the iceberg, and many don't even get convictions, and many don't even get to court, because that's how prolific and how prevalent child sexual abuse is within our society. And we have to have a zero tolerance to it because of the damage that it causes.
Absolutely. We're talking about, you know, children are our future leaders.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, and they deserve a childhood.
And they deserve to be protected and kept safe.
Absolutely. So thank you very much, Chris. And that's all for today.
Lovely. All right, I shall end this. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Please give us your feedback, ideas for conversations in the future. Very much appreciated.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.